The Azores have been described as Europe's version of Hawaii, and after a week on the main Azore island of Sao Miguel, it's not hard to compare the Azores to Hawaii. The days were filled with hiking around the mountains, relaxing in hot spring pools, staring off the endless viewpoints of the coastline, eating some of the best seafood in the world, drinking cheap beer. Now, if only the water was crystal clear and warm, could it really beat out Hawaii for that top spot. After a sleepless red-eye flight from Boston, my wife, her parents, and I all loaded into the rental car before the sun rose above the mountains on the eastern end of the island of the Azores. And off we went, started exploring the island for ourselves.
How was it?
And with the guidance of a meticulously crafted itinerary that my wife put together, we head into the northern coast to start our trip. Flying into Ponte Delgado on the Isle of Sao Miguel, we had to go shake off the little bit of sleep we had with some coffee and espresso in the morning before exploring the rest of the island. And the first stop on the trip was Parque Natural de Ribeira dos Calderas. I'm sure I said it wrong, but best I could do. With its massive waterfalls flowing down the valley into the river, it still operates a 16th century mill. It's a marvel to see. And like so many other places that we ended up seeing on the Azores, you really feel like you've gone back in time to see the way people lived with the land and without these modern conveniences we have today. It just seemed to detach us from nature in itself and, of course, reality. And it sure as hell was super pretty. Between stopping at all the coastal viewpoints that dotted the roadside and circumnavigated the island, we made sure to stop at Europe's only 2 tea plantations. Not much of a tea drinker myself, but when in Rome, or in this case, when in the Azores. We were able to wander the tea plantation and see the rows and rows of tea leaves being harvested by the local workers and of course maintained by the local goats. Seeing the way they extract the water from above the hill and on the mountain and bring it all the way down so it's naturally irrigating, and of course with an ocean off in the distance, it's a wonder to see this kind of farming style, which is completely different than what we have in the States, where it's just flat fields and heavily mechanized. For this trip, we rented a car because, to be honest, I'm not exactly sure how you'd get around otherwise unless you were visiting with a tour group and they traveled with a bus or a shuttle. Downloading the maps ahead of time on Google Maps and Maps.me, we had no issues plugging in all of our destinations and just following the road signs. Though we didn't know Portuguese, once you learn a few common names for street like route or avenue, like avenida or road estrada, you get it. And then once you know those, you feel way more confident looking for turns off the main highway, that one that circumnavigates the entire island. And even though I mentioned that my wife and her mom had planned this great itinerary, it really left a lot for us to just explore ourselves. It very much was get to a point here and then just go figure it out. Whether it was looking at all these viewpoints along the coast, or just once we got down to the city of Ribeira Grande where we were staying, you could just wander the streets and just explore it yourself. And here we found this place that was just selling these amazing liquor drinks, all different flavors that we had no idea, but it was just around the corner from where we were staying. And of course, after endless wandering, we get exhausted, and then go get some dinner, and then head back to the place for the night to repeat again for the next day. Which I cannot complain after a red-eye flight where I barely slept at all, so I was excited for the following day. Kicking off the second day of the trip with a stop at Caldeira Velha Hot Springs before I hiked up the mountain. Getting there early, we had our pick of the pools to go. Some were just warm and clear, while others were mineral-rich and almost 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and of course smelled like sulfur. But eventually the crowds came in, just in time for us to leave and head to the bus that would eventually take us to Lagoa de Fogo. Up and up the bus climbed, further and further up the switchbacks, eventually to the crown jewel of the hike around the Lagoa de Fogo. It's a central part of the island, and due to the steepness of the road and the fear of tourists driving off the road, you were required to take the shuttle bus up and down. Luckily, the bus makes stops at a few viewpoints along the way, hang out for a few minutes so you can get some photos before heading back down. But we got off at the trailhead so we could head down to the lake itself. The hike down to the lake was steep. It reminded me of the New England hikes, with their steep steps that jolt your knees. Dropping down only about 100 meters, you reach the shoreline of the lake. The 4 of us wandered around towards the east end of the lake where we'd hung out for lunch with a view. The water, though much bluer from above when it reflects the blue off the sky, was still crystal clear up close. The eastern face of Pico de Barossa was covered in vegetation, moss, rocky faces. Meanwhile, the shoreline around us had tall pine trees. It was a wonderfully diverse microcosm on the island in the middle of the Atlantic. After hiking back out of the caldera on the top of an old volcano, we drove down the slope to a few breweries that are on the island. Though they're new to the craft beer scene, the post-hike beers were delicious, and the people we got to meet and talk with were great and wonderful. They each had their own experience with whether it be the craft beer scene or just their first time in the Azores itself. Timing our trip just right, we were actually just ahead of an approaching hurricane that was pointed toward the Azores. Well, this brought some incredible surf. Bum I didn't have my board with me and didn't rent one, but later in the week the swell really picked up after it passed and made for some incredible waves, and I was even more jealous, but at least I got some incredible photos and videos along the way. We finished our drinks at the beach bar and wandered back to town before the winds picked up as the hurricane passed overhead. Then, the next day, was clear as it could be. Well, besides all the wind. Luckily, the wind subsided as we headed inland and were more protected by the towering walls that surrounded the town of Furnas. Our first stop of the day was to the Fumaroles Lagoa de Furnas, which are not just another hot spring, but rather thermal vents that the local population has used to cook meals underground for centuries. Yes, alongside this pristine lake, there are boiling thermal pools that heat the ground around it. And then the locals, or I guess now for mostly it's just the restaurants, will bury large pots for a family-style meal to be eaten later in the day. And, luckily for us, we're going to get to enjoy it for lunch. The dish is traditionally a rich stew of beef, pork, chicken, or blood sausage with some cabbage, potatoes, and yams. And it was delicious. Afterwards, we walked into town to the Tanque Termal Parque Terra Nostra for the strangest hot springs we'd ever seen. This iron-rich water was wonderfully relaxing. And because the hurricane scared most of the visitors off, we had this normally packed pool nearly all to ourselves. But yes, though it was warm and amazing and beautiful, it does leave you and your bathing suit a hint of brown. To cool back down, we grabbed a pint at the local cafe, where you don't really just order a beer, you order the size of beer you want. But being an island made of volcanoes, there was no shortage of thermal vents around this town. And with water flowing down nearly every hillside, some water has some unique properties to it, like tasting sour or naturally carbonated. Needless to say, I think this might be an acquired taste because, to me, and everybody else, it tasted pretty nasty. Unlike Hawaii, Europe's Azores are much more self-reliant beyond just the ocean, with tons of farming and cattle raising, which means they have some incredibly delicious cheeses to try. Another uniquely Azorean custom are the ceramics. Nearly every home has their walls lined with handmade ceramic art or numbers or lettering. This style of white ceramic with blue detail could be found all across the island. And the craftsmanship was easily noticeable, so it was very cool to be able to go to the factory and see where it's made, going from the clay starters to the finished pottery. Plus, they even had birds on the roof. That is just incredible. Other hikes to the lakes on the west end of the island, the Sete Cidades, where the aqua blue side meets the emerald green end, and this made for an incredible view from above. Driving up and over the volcano's rim into the large caldera to see the small town inside was an absurd concept to someone who's never seen this before. Of course, there are tons and tons of hanging lakes all around the area, so you're never more than, 1 mile between stops, and every time we absolutely had to stop. But eventually we made it down into the lake so that we could go wander around. The small town of Sete Cidades didn't really have much, but a beautiful church and, 360-degree views of towering walls around it. It definitely made us feel a little bit at home. And the last stop of the day, because the road was under construction due to a rock slide, we had to hike down 100 meters to reach the Ponte de Ferraria, a natural swimming pool in the ocean with a thermal vent feeding into it. keeping the water a comfortable 70 to 90 degrees Fahrenheit compared to the brisk ocean temperatures outside the pool area. Needless to say, it was far less relaxing than the hot spring pools that we had in the other parts of the island, but this was so unique and so wild. The waves were rolling right in through the pool and sending us all holding on for dear life to the ropes that were crossed from one end to the other.
On our way back to Ponta Delgada, we made a quick stop over at a cove near Ponta del Castello, where the swell from the hurricane were coming in perfectly for us to watch the surfers in the water. Back in the city for the tail end of our trip, it was fun to see the architectural juxtaposition against the nature, the mountains, and the ocean that we spent so much time in so far on this trip. Plus, it was another great experience to stop into the pubs and get another delicious meal, which honestly was so easy to come by everywhere we went. Navigating around the Azores was surprisingly easy. Most people we met spoke English, and if they didn't, a few gestures and pointing went a long way. And for €1 to €3, you could get any beer on draft for the most part. Which was cool to hear about pretty much every other island we visited, was that people were able to live like normal lives here, not dependent upon tourism. And the history that surrounded you was ever present, which was so beautiful.
But what I gained the most appreciation for were the pineapples. After visiting one of the plantations, we found out that pineapples can take over 2 years to grow to a full size. Can you believe it? That's insane. And it makes those tropical drinks tasty. Even better now. Capping off our amazing trip to the Azores, we made a stop at the Gin Library, a place that is the largest collection of gin in the world, and I do mean from all over the world. Travelers show up bringing a bottle of their local gin from wherever they are in exchange for one of the library's own bottles, and that's how they grew their collection. They had gin from South Africa to Pennsylvania to Norway to all over Asia.
You can try whatever you want. If the bottle is open and there's gin inside, you can try it. Working here, we are allowed to drink at work, so we've tried almost all the gins that we have here.
The Azores had so much to offer, and I would definitely put it on your bucket list to go visit one time.